Hey guys, how are you? I hope you had a great day. I wanted to get this to you guys yesterday, but unfortunately I didn't have enough time to go back and take more notes. It's kind of funny. I don't know if you guys ever have this happen to you where you all of a sudden have a topic that's like thrown in your face several times. And for me, the last, I would say 36, actually it started on Saturday, with the topic of how to sleep better. And so on my drive back from Boston for the Thanksgiving holiday, I loaded my Spotify with a bunch of podcasts. And one of the podcasts was with this guy, Sean Stevenson, and he wrote this book called Sleep Smarter. And really, really interesting talk. And so was like, oh my gosh, I need to go home and re-listen to this because I know a lot of people who need this information. I sleep fairly well, but there are still some things that he talked about that I wanted to implement. And then no sooner do I get home, and on Sunday, I'm flipping through Women's Day magazine that for some reason I'm getting, even though I didn't want it. But I was flipping through it, and the entire major article in the magazine was, again, about how to sleep better. So I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like really crazy that I'm getting all this information about sleep. You can see my cat. I don't know if you heard it, but anyway. So I wanted to get that to you guys, and I took notes on both. And so there's so many different nuggets in here, so I'm going to try and go through this pretty quickly because I literally have 5 pages of notes from everything that he was going through. And so, when this guy, Sean Stevenson, was talking about, he said, a lot of people get 8 hours of sleep, but they still don't feel rested. And so he said, basically, you want to make sure you have quality sleep, not just quantity. He said it's basically like the same idea as when you're eating a good diet. That idea of calories in and calories out. So if you have broccoli versus a bunch of Twinkies, it's not the same thing for your body. He said the same thing goes for sleep, that you could actually be sleeping, but it's like Twinkie sleep instead of quality sleep. And so what he was saying is that each cycle that we need to have is 75 to 120 minutes long, and you need at least 4 of those in a night. And so he said that basically the bottom floor of how many hours you should be getting is about 6 hours. And I know for a lot of you parents, that can be super challenging with kids who are waking up in the middle of the night and whatnot. But that's what he said is the bare minimum in terms of the number and duration of time. And, this Women's Day article was talking about how 88% of women do not sleep through the night regularly. And 1/3 of those that they polled, there are 1,500 women that they polled, said that they never get a solid, uninterrupted night's sleep, which, again, I think a lot of you parents can probably relate to these days. And the other thing that Sean Stevenson talked about was that poor sleep is the #1 epigenetic trigger in our body. So that goes back to those genes, and how do you turn on and off those genes that are going on in your body. You want to upregulate and deregulate, turning on the ones that you want to be activated and turning off the ones that you don't, right? And so he says that when you don't get enough sleep, that really has a huge detriment on those genes. And that melatonin in particular, which I don't know if you guys know, is a key activator in our body for sleep, right? So, and he said it's possibly the #1 anti-cancer, that is hormone that's produced in our body. And that the WHO says that shift work is considered a class 2 carcinogen because you don't get enough of that dark cycle. And that means that you're not getting as much melatonin in that phase of darkness, right? Because you're working at night and sleeping during the day, which was crazy when I heard that. I had a huge conversation with my dad because he worked in the ER. And so, of course, he was always flopping around, which he talks about as being absolutely terrible for your body. And so that's where he talked about is consistency is key, right? So he said, you want to try and go to bed kind of around the same time, but he said really waking up is the most important thing. He said you want to keep it within about 30 minutes. He said that we are basically creating social jet lag is what he called it, by bouncing around and having different wake up times during the week and on weekends. Because, I know I do this, right? So when I was working in an office, I don't really do this so much anymore, but when I was working in an office, I'd have to get up really early in the morning. So then on the weekends, I would sleep until like 9 o'clock, 9:30, and weekdays getting up at 7 or whatever it was. So he said, really, it's really great if you can keep that consistent within 30 minutes is what he recommends. And he said that the time between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. was the best quality sleep time because it has a more of a restorative impact on your body. And so I know for me, I'm kind of a night owl, so usually I'm going to bed at midnight. So I don't really see that changing a ton. But he said as much as you can maximize that 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. window, the better. And so there are a couple of topics that the article and this guy talked about. And one was obviously caffeine. We all know about caffeine and the impact on sleep. But he said that they had done a study on people, and they had given people caffeine immediately before bed, 3 hours before bed, and 6 hours before bed. And they basically gave them a 200 milligrams worth of caffeine, and it was basically the equivalent of a strong cup of coffee. And they said that even 6 hours out, participants lost 1 hour of actual sleep. And these people thought they were asleep, right? But it was kind of like that Twinkie sleep. But the sleep monitors show that they actually lost an hour's worth of that restorative REM cycle, even though they were still, unconscious, right? Hey, Noelle, how are you? I hope this really helps, because I was like, oh my gosh, I know so many people who don't sleep well and who are insomniacs and stuff. So I'm like, if you can take any of this stuff, I'll just kind of give you guys as much good stuff as I can, and hopefully something will work for you guys. So what he was recommending was that caffeine has a half-life of 8 hours. So he recommended drinking your last cup of coffee by late morning. And I know I have a caffeine sensitivity. I don't drink a ton of caffeine, certainly not. Sometimes I do it in the afternoon, but for me, it's not really a good idea. The other thing he talked about was noise. And, a lot of noise machines are white noise makers, but he called something called pink noise, which I had honestly never heard about before. And he says it's a balance of low and high frequencies, and it enhances, he said, deep, slow wave sleep, whatever that means, right? And he said it improves memory and learning. And there's an app that I actually downloaded after. It was $1.99, and it was called Noisli, Noisli. And they have a variety of noises that you can choose. Some are like, waves of the ocean. The one I actually chose was more like tones that change a little bit. So I really like that app. I've started using it. And the other thing, obviously we also hear a lot about light and the effects of blue light in particular. And I found this fascinating because I knew, obviously screen time before bed is not a good idea. You hear over and over again about how all the devices and TV and everything that we have is really impairing, our sleep. And what he said was blue light in particular is really harmful because it increases cortisol in your body and it decreases that melatonin. And so he said that blue light has twice the effect on your body in terms of melatonin production and your circadian rhythms. And obviously all this is in a negative effect as green light, okay? And so what I discovered, too, was that on your phone, if you haven't discovered it already, on the Apple platform, there's something called night shift mode. And you could put your phone on night shift mode, and that basically takes the blue light out. On Android, it's called night mode. And actually on my phone, it just said something about removing blue light. So I definitely try that for the evening to take that off. Because he said every hour you're on your device, it suppresses melatonin for 30 minutes. So he recommends an hour curfew on screen time. And I know a lot of people, love watching TV before going to bed. I know I'm a big TV person, but, if you can switch that to a book, on your phone or something with that blue light removed, that might help you a little bit decompress. And he also recommended actually specifically, if you're going to read before bed, this is such random tidbits, but I thought they were really insightful. He recommended reading fiction instead of nonfiction or like personal development because that engages your brain more and in a different way and gets you kind of thinking and cerebral, whereas he found that sort of a more fanciful storyline was a little bit more relaxing and creative and kind of, promotes good dreams and everything like that too. The other thing obviously recommended was blackout shades to keep out all light. He also recommends no night lights, that literally a small light in your room can really lessen the sleep that you get. And I know for a lot of kids too, night lights are huge, right? And so he talked about having discussions with your kids and, trying to incentivize them not to have a nightlight and kind of, making it more about your relationship and having them feel secure. But, as we all know and see with kids, sometimes it's not always as simple as just saying those kinds of things, right? Hey, Jean, how are you? Yeah, so he said no night lights, and especially in your rooms, like don't try not to have lights on because that can really interrupt your sleep in those blackout shades. The other thing that I discovered from this Women's Day article is that there are special light bulbs that are blue light free. So I know in my room I was thinking about that too, was having at least one light in my room that maybe didn't have that blue light, because what the article in Women's Day said that commonly CFLs and LED lights are 35% blue light. So that's a lot of blue light. Even though they look white, that they really do have a large component of blue light in them. And so there was one company that they recommended, and I found something on Amazon as well that supposedly didn't have blue light in it. So that might be good for like a bedside table kind of a thing if you're reading like a physical book. The other thing they talked about was temperature. I don't know about you guys, but this was something that like I kind of always intuitively like my room chilly when I sleep. And I sleep better when I'm like colder and snuggling in my blankets. But they said that the optimal temperature for a room is between 62 and 68 degrees. That's optimal. And so what they said was that researchers found that for insomniacs, if they could just decrease their body temperature by 1 degree, it had an amazing impact on their ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. And so what they did was to test this, they had these cooling caps that ran cool water through them to basically, cool their body temperature down. Now, don't go, jokes about, don't go putting an ice pack on your head or anything drastic like that. But that just be aware of the temperature in your room and try to make it maybe a little bit cooler, because that could help you relax more. And also, you guys probably already know this as well, that our body temperature actually drops at the end of the day, and that's part of one of the physical things that occurs in our body to then prompt in the melatonin and some of these other triggers to happen for us to fall asleep. So, other things that they recommend in the Women's Day article was, having a fan in your room, that if you find that you're really, really hot when you sleep, that they said that what you can do is put your pillowcase in a Ziploc bag and stick it in the freezer. That way, when you pull it out right before you go to bed, it's like super cold. They also recommended down pillows. Also, memory foam supposedly also makes them, can make you really hot. So there's a special kind of memory foam called open cell foam that also prevents you from kind of roasting, I guess, in your bed. I've never slept in a memory foam bed, so I'm not really sure about that one. They also said that thread counts for your sheets under 600 are better as well for being a little bit cooler, which you wouldn't normally think of. We always think about having higher thread counts, right? The other thing, I know happens to me from time to time is when your brain won't shut off, right? So you're laying there in bed and you're like, oh my God, I got to do this. Or you're thinking about work problems, or, this happens all the time. What he recommended was keeping a notepad by the side of your bed. That way, as you're kind of thinking, you can start writing down some of these solutions and then just kind of like removing them out of your brain and kind of setting it aside for the night because you've kind of checked that box, right? He said that just the act of writing it down makes your brain feel like you've solved that for the night and you can kind of release it. So hopefully that might help some of you, because I know, God, I probably need to do that. Oh my gosh, Michelle, you and me, like my room is a total bat cave. So I don't have night lights, I don't have anything. The other thing that he mentioned was not to get out of bed. Like if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh, I kind of have to go to the bathroom, he really recommended not getting up in the middle of the night, like unless you're going to have to really pee, because he said just getting up to go to the bathroom and coming back, it increases your heart rate enough that it may make it harder for you to fall back asleep. So he said, unless it's like, you're not going to be able to make it through the night kind of a situation, to not do that. And he also recommended, towards the end of the day, to kind of wean off some of your fluid intake, as well as to try and make it so you don't have to go to the bathroom. The other thing they talked about was napping, and he said basically do not nap after 3 p.m., especially if you have problems sleeping. And then if you do decide to nap, they recommended only doing 30 minutes so that you take the edge off, but that you don't end up being groggy and it doesn't end up throwing off your sleep cycle. Another interesting one that I thought I can see tons of people doing this, is don't work out too late at night, right? And the reason why he said was because it raises your body temperature, making it harder for you to sleep. So if you think about it, the end of the day, your body temperature is dropping to start your body going into, releasing all these hormones and melatonin and everything to start entering that phase of sleep. He said if you go work out, then your body temperature is raising, and so then it's going to be harder for all of those processes to happen. Oh, that's interesting, Jason, about the vitamin D deficiency. That's awesome. Thanks for those tips too, because they didn't say anything about those. Yeah, so don't work out at night, which again is super hard, especially if you have kids, right? Or if you're at work, right? And you're working long hours. The times you have to work is either getting up really early in the morning, and if you're like me, that doesn't happen, or late at night, right? So just, I guess, try not to make it too late, or else you'll be up to all hours. The other thing they said about pets was don't co-sleep with your pets. That, just their stirring and everything can drive you crazy. And I know for me, like my cat sleeps with me in my room. And if you guys didn't know this, like I'm an Airbnb host, so I have guests in my house. So typically, if there are people I don't know, obviously I'm like locking my bedroom door just in case. And, but she like whines, right, and cries and wants in and out. So twice a night, I'm like waking up to let her behind in and out. So right now I've had the same guest for like 6 months who I trust. So I've been keeping my door open, so I'm actually sleeping really, really well. But basically, don't co-sleep with your pets. That goes for children too. And if you do sleep with them and they start stirring around 4:30, because they want to be fed or whatnot, they said make sure that you have like maybe an auto feeder somewhere in your house that might be able to release food at like 5 a.m. or whatever it might be, so that they don't bug you. Okay, so for kids, we talked about the nightlight thing, and they really talked about the importance of routine, which I think most of y'all probably know that routine is, as a non-parent, even I know from watching my brother and his wife, they're so good about bedtime routines, and they actually did a lot of the things they said, and that the repetition is key, having that warm bath and a book and a song or whatever it is, and that they really did recommend not co-sleeping with your kids, and when they come to your bed or whatever, taking them right back and not lingering, and rewarding them for uninterrupted sleep, and bigger rewards at the end of the week, that kind of stuff. And they also recommended, because I know this definitely is a topic of conversation between friends and everything, is that take turns with your spouse in terms of who's on duty. So try to trade off every other night. That way, every other night, you're hopefully getting a good night's sleep because your partner is taking care of it. And, to have that partner have the monitor by their bedside table, so it's not waking both of you up in the middle of the night, and wearing earplugs and those kinds of things when it's your night off, so that you can sleep better. And for folks who have trouble sleeping, they recommended weighted blankets, which I had heard about those before, which can basically, interestingly, trigger the brain to release some neurotransmitters to help you sleep. And then they also talked about doing a progressive relaxation exercise where you progressively tense and release your muscles, starting at your toes and then working all the way up to your head and neck. And that basically what it says is it lets your muscles know, and kind of signals them that it's like time to sleep. And then they also mentioned that there's something called adult lullabies, which I had absolutely never heard of before. And then lastly, I think this is like the last of my tidbits here, is that they recommend it in the morning, that really like your whole sleep process starts really in the morning, and that you should get up and open the curtains to let in the light, because the light is very important, as a lot of us are experiencing photosensitivity right now and differentials, and what that brings, that getting those lights if you need them to help your body wake up and assist you in waking up. And then immediately in the morning, drinking 16 ounces of water to hydrate your body and get your processes going. And that they also did recommend working out in the morning. They said that people who work out for 45 minutes in the morning 5 times a week sleep 70% better. So I thought that was a great, great thing. And for those of you who have seen some of my posts about the little yellow pill, as well as the NRF1, those have had insane effects on people's sleep, because there is a correlation between inflammatory response in your body and sleep. And so we've had so many people, that's like usually the first thing that people notice is energy changes in their body, sleep changes in their body. And then when the NRF1, it's more of a deepening of sleep. Like I don't normally remember my dreams, and I have some seriously fun and crazy dreams now that I'm on that. And that's having to do with the mitochondria repair in your cells. So anyway, if there's any questions that you guys have about what I talked about, I'd love to send them to you. Just shoot me a message or text. Yeah, I hope that was helpful, because I was like, this must be information I'm supposed to convey to people. So you guys have a great night. It's great to see you. See ya.